Hello again. Today we're going to be focusing on how to create a basic 3D solids model inside AutoCAD. AutoCAD early on in the late 1990s and actually in the mid 1990s started to really progress in the use of 3D modeling. Even though its mainstay has always been a 2D, two-dimensional drawing environment, they moved into the 3D realm. It was 2.5D for quite a while, and then they finally moved into true 3D. So today we're going to create the object as you've seen in the initial lead up. That's going to be our object of the day that we're going to create, and we're going to do it as a 3D model. So how do we start? How do we create a 3D model? Can we start where we are now and create the 3D model? A lot of questions get created. Well, theoretically, we could start exactly where we're at. So we could go through the basic setup routine, and we'll start right there. So let's go and do the units. And we're going to work with 2 decimal place dimensions today. Take it back. 3 decimal place dimensions today because our drawing indicated 3 decimal places. And our polar and object snap, 5 degrees for polar. Object snap settings, endpoint, midpoint, center, perpendicular, intersection, extension. Those standard 6 are always good to do. There's also 3D object snaps that you can also set up as a setup option. When you're working with 3D, you could snap to midpoints on edges, and we'll turn on our 3D object snap features here. So we might do perpendicular, midpoint on an edge. That's always good to go. Center out of a face, that kind of thing. We'll choose OK. Lastly, we'll set up our layers. We're going to go ahead and set up a new layer. We'll call this object. And we'll make it our burnt orange. And our line weight will be 0.5 millimeters is our standard setup. Okay, so we've got our layers set up. And we'll turn our grid off, so that makes it a little bit easier to use. So I've pasted a copy of the image here on our screen to make it a little bit easier for you to follow along on what we're going to be creating. And if it goes away, we'll try to coordinate it from there. So we can start off, and when we look at this, you've got the front view here, then you got a side view, and then you've got the back. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start on the side view. Because when we're creating this as a 3D solid, what I would like to do is take the side view shape and extrude it the distance of 3.75. And again, extrusion is just taking a shape, extruding it, or expanding it to a specific distance. And we'll show you some of the other really cool features that we can do with this particular solids modeling software after we're done building this. So in my 2D drawing environment, I'm going to go ahead and draw this to scale. So we'll start here, and we could even make this parametric and do it as a parametric drawing also. So even if I sketch this out, and we'll throw an arc in here, 3-point arc. And I could go to parametrics and auto constrain it. And then linear dimensions. Let me undo that. Dimension from each of these corners. This one needs to be, oh my gosh, it's 1.88. This is really going to shrink. And then we have to do another linear dimension. And then we'll do a radius dimension, and this hopefully should clean it up. Which it did. I just need to shrink this now. Shrink the image down. move it so it's in the ballpark. And we got a couple more dimensions we need to deal with. 0.87 here. And I don't see a top dimension, but the center point of this is lined up here, so I need to constrain this so that way this is vertical. So let's see if we can put a linear dimension in between here and there and make this 0. Ooh, that didn't work. Yeah, it would be a little bit easier if I constrain this automatically. There we go. So all I did was constrain these two up so we're okay. I'll again shrink this, bring it in closer with the move command so we can see it. Alright, so I've finally got the dimensions to behave. Had to think a little bit about how all that needs to come about. We'll bring this one in a little bit closer. We'll bring this one in a little bit closer so that way they're not so far away. And we have a parametric design drawing. Pretty cool. So we just parametrically created this. Let's go ahead and save our work, and then we'll move on to the next step, which requires us to go from drafting and annotation to 3D modeling. So selecting from the drafting pull down, we're going to go to 3D modeling. And that's going to change the title block ribbon. I'm also going to go to a three-dimensional view, which is going to change our look a little bit. And a couple of things that need to happen here. We need to create a... actually, before that, I probably should have went back to drafting and basics. Hang on. I need to create what is known as a boundary. And if I pick the points, yep, and so I need to create a boundary of the shape, which is a polyline, basically. So under the hatch area, there is a command called boundary. And it works just like the hatch command. I can pick a point inside an object. So I want to pick it inside our object shape, right mouse click, and it creates a polyline. So now that's one single object. I'll then use the extrude tool, as we mentioned earlier, and that is found under 3D modeling, to create the 3D object. So I change the 3D modeling, I pick extrude, pick the object, right mouse click, and it asks me to enter, and it asks me what is the height of the extrusion. Well, we need the whole thing to be 3.75 inches, so I'll type that in. You're going, well, that didn't do anything. It didn't change anything. But actually it really did. We now have a three-dimensional object out of the screen, which is pretty darn cool. If we look at the top view, we'll still see that we need to create a 1.25 inch radius at 1.875, and there's 625 back on each of those. So to center that one along that top edge. All right, so we've got our 3D object. We can also do what is known as a shading. There is the ability to shade objects, and you've got your layers here in this 3D. You've got the view, which we'll deal with a second. Sectioning, so you can cut sections through 3D objects. You've got your draw and your modify menu system. Then you have your solids editing, and you've got your 3D modeling, which we just used, the extrude tool. So under 2D wireframe, under the view, under 2D wireframe, we can shade this. So we can do a shaded rendering of the object, and you can see what happens is that it shades the object, it creates a black background, but now also up in the upper right hand corner we've got the house, which gives us a 3D view, and then we have the view cube that if I left mouse click and hold it, I can rotate the view cube to see what this object looks like. So I can rotate the visual plane, which is pretty darn cool. So I can rotate this around to see what it looks like in a three-dimensional plane. Okay, and you can see that the image actually updates around by itself. And there's some other tools that you can rotate objects with too. So at this point, what we're going to need to do is we need to cut the back of the object at 1.25, and we'll actually go back from the bottom to the top. So let me flip around. There we go. So it's a 1.25 inch radius, 1.875 in across the back. So I need to look at the back of the object, and so I can actually just click on it and rotate the object so we can see the back. And what I need to do is I need to create something to cut out that shape, and that's actually a circle. And so we're going to create a circle on the back, but it's got to be 1.875 in. Well, 1.875, that's half of 3.75, so I'll just create a circle halfway in. So we're going to pick a circle, and it's going to be on the midpoint of that back line. And so I could also pick the center of that object, the 3D center. Remember, that was one of the feature options that we had, that we could pick the 3D center. I'm going to pick the endpoint on the top edge here. And uh-oh, that's not going to work, is it? Because what happened? That object is on that surface. That's a problem. It's on the original surface. Huh. So I'm going to need to pick a surface before I can draw. So I'm going to have to highlight the surface first. And I did pick the center, but we know that we can move this, right? Because it's an object. So let me undo this and redo it again. So what I did was I picked the circle, picked the surface that I need to put it on, along with the location. And I'm just ballparking the location here. It's going to pick it from the center because that's the base object. But I can grab this, grip it, and I can take that grip and move it to the top, to the middle. Congratulations. Now we can change the size of the object. That's the dimension. Or I can add parametrics to it. So let's flip over to parametrics, add a diameter dimension, a radius dimension, because it's 1.25 radius. Let's see if we can flip around to the right side on the back here. Radius 2, let's say 1.25, and let's see what happens here. Wow. Let's check and see if with the dimension command or a properties command, if that's set it up. So it's asking me to align the constraint, annotate radius. So it still thinks X and Y is there. So that becomes a problem, right? Because our X and Y is still on the bottom. So I'm going to need to change my X and Y capability. That's called user coordinate systems, otherwise known as UCS. I need to change my user coordinate system. So the easiest way to change that is, let me flip it around. Again, I'm just using the view cube to check it out. I'm going to put the X and Y on the back surface of the object. And in the middle here with the coordinates, there's a whole bunch of UCS options that we can use. So we can do anything from show the icon to just the UCS general command, name a UCS. We can undo the previous one, locate the origin, pick 3 points to define it. And that's usually the easiest one to do. So when we pick 3 points to define a UCS, I pick the origin, the 0, 0, 0 first, so I'm going to pick that corner. Pick a positive X, that's going to be along this edge, and the positive Y is going to be along the vertical. Now when I look at this, we now have X and Y that way. Alright, let's try something. Let's go back to annotate, do a radius dimension, and it says it's 0.98666, so the parametric didn't work, did it? So now if I choose parametric, pick the arc, and then I change that to 1.25, congratulations, that now changed it. Why did that work? Because I changed the X and Y placement using the UCS tool. And again, the home is where I can go back to see all these. So I flip that back. All right. So that's an interesting view. So now what's going to happen is I have to cut this object or make this object into a cylinder. And so we're going to extrude this. I could also use the press pull, but I can extrude this. So we're going to extrude this. And it's going to ask us to extrude, and I can just pick and drag the direction that I want to extrude. So I'm going to extrude this direction. Now I could change the color of this. I can pick it, right mouse click, and I can reset the layer. Well, I can actually create a new layer. Let's go ahead and create a new layer here real quick. New layer. We'll just make this a bright red layer. Just call that layer 1. So we'll pick this, change it to layer 1. Alright, so now we've got a beige object and a layer 1 object, which is really good looking. And we're going to use a tool under solids editing. In solids editing, we have basically union, which adds two solids together, subtraction, which is what we're going to use to subtract two objects, and then we've got intersection. What's the common surface between two objects? And that's the key. It'll just take the common surface. So we're going to go ahead and subtract. So I'm going to pick subtract. The base object is the original shape, or the big object. Right mouse click. And the object I want to subtract is the cylinder. And we right mouse click after selecting each of those. And you can see that it cut out the shape. So that looked pretty cool. That worked pretty good. Actually, this is the exact shape of the object. So creating, that looks pretty darn close. It's actually true. And with the shade commanded, you can actually see how the things come out. And that would be really hard to draw as a two-dimensional shape. So creating it as a 3D solid is much easier to accomplish that. So again, a couple of quick review items. We're also going to play with some of the other features here in just a second. Use the extrude tool, use the subtraction tools, shading under view, UCS. I use the 3-point UCS, but you can pick any of the UCS coordinate location tools, the user coordinate tools. That's the difference between it working and not working. And then actually throwing in the parametrics help too. The other things that you could do is you could take all the parametric dimensions, put them on a separate layer so you can turn them off so they'd be hidden in the future. That would be a good task to do. Now let's talk a little bit about how we can make things really kind of interesting. Let's say, for example, I create an ellipse, and I'll just create an ellipse on this surface here. Right in the center of that surface, we'll just kind of create an ellipse. And we'll look at this object. Is that the bottom? Yep, that's the bottom. Okay, so I've got the object. Or is it on the back? Wow, it's on the back of the object, it looks like. Nope, I've got it right there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and use this press pull. The press pull object, I pick my feature, and I can either pull it, or I can press it in and cut it. Or at least press it in the other direction. So if I'm going to make a hole out of this, I'm going to go ahead and extrude it backwards like I just did. And you'll notice what happened is that it created a hole. It went through the object and it figured out that that was a hole itself. But then you go, oh no, I didn't want that. I didn't want it all the way through. So I could use press pull again, pick the edge of the object. I might have to go on the other side, pick the front. But I can now press pull this back. So it's not all the way through the object anymore. Oh, still was through the object. But you can see what I can do is I can edit the feature, and I can press pull the feature back if I don't need to. I can also undo. That will work too. But press pull's kind of a fun tool. The other feature that we also have is called the poly solid. Let's go ahead and do the top view here. Oops, wrong view. That's bad. All right, so let's go take a look at the poly solid. Uh-oh, what happened? I just deleted that parametric dimension that we weren't using. This poly solid tool is kind of neat if you wanted to do an architectural drawing. So what it does is it creates a solid and I want to look at the UCS here, X and Y. So I want to change my view. So I want to change my view to the view manager. And so I want to go to current view. I want to go to model view. Preset views. Let's do preset views. And I can do there we go. That's what I was looking for right there. Okay, so I picked the preset view, hit set current and apply, and that's the angle that I wanted to see, was this surface, to make X and Y visible. Because this the poly solid allows me to draw on the surface, and it's going to draw on X and Y. And it's going to create roughly like an 8-foot high wall. And so let me go to the UCS previous. Let me jump back and go to the view. This will work a little bit better. Let's hit the UCS previous again. There we go. X and Y are now on the base floor. We're going to do the poly solid on the floor here. And you can see that what I'm able to create so poly solid, so I'm able to create a polygonal solid, and I can point and shoot, use the angles if I needed to. So if I wanted to make make a 45-degree angle, I could. There's a 45-degree angle, 13 inches long. Then I can make it 90 from there. You know, there's a lot of things that I can do. And so the whole idea is that we can create a solid. Now you still have to blow the doors and the windows, just like I did with the ellipse. I have to create a shape on that surface, on that press pull surface, to create the door and the window. But it will give you a three-dimensional layout operation environment. So we're going to give you a project to work on, and it's going to be a simple three-dimensional solid to create. This will get you to the point of understanding the basics of 3D solid, and then you can go on, and there's some chapters in the book if you want to review it to go a little bit further in 3D solids. There's definitely some ability to pull images and views off of the 3D solid environment. That can be found under modeling, and the solid drawing and the solid view tools are the ones that you want to, solid profile, solid drawing, and solid view tools are all the tools that you can use to help pull off top, front, right side orthographics from objects or elevation views from 3D polysolids. Have a great day.